coercion to force Canada to become a 51st state. It is really, really important that we actually are thinking about how we manage the relationship with President Trump, to the extent that that is possible, and how we actually look forward to building a society that can be more resilient, an economy that can be more resilient. We obviously need to work our way through the tariffs, and we are endeavoring to do that. I spent a lot of time in Washington over the past few months, and I will tell you that's kind of like entering the twilight zone. Yeah. But we have to work our way through, and we will eventually have to have conversations with the president about what the nature of the relationship will look like going forward. But we also have to recognize that irrespective of our ability to actually avoid the tariffs, we will never go back to trusting the Americans in the way that we trusted them before. That is over, and Canada needs to, in some respects, grow up and be more independent and more resilient. That means we need to reduce interprovincial trade barriers, we need to deepen our economic ties with more reliable partners, we need to strengthen our trade infrastructure, we need to think about vulnerabilities in our own infrastructure, and we need to think about how we actually accelerate the development of a range of things that can enable us to be better partners with other countries around the world, including areas like critical minerals, for example. That is not a short-term proposition. It's going to take time, and the next couple of years are going to be bumpy. But I would say that I do think the ballot question, and I hear this, I've been in many ridings around this province, and in fact, in Pierre Poilievre's riding last week. And what I hear from folks is, this is the ballot box question. The ballot box question is about Trump, but it's also about who is the right person to lead Canada through this very challenging period of time. On the one hand, you have Mark Carney, who has spent his life as a senior person in the public service and in the private sector. He has enormous experience with economic issues. In fact, I think if you went and tried to find somebody in this country who had better experience than him to fill this role at this time in Canadian history, you wouldn't be able to find somebody. I've had the privilege of knowing Mark for 25 years. He's an enormously thoughtful and ethical person, but he's just the right person for the time. On the other hand, you have Mr. Poilievre, who graduated from undergraduate university and went directly into the House of Commons. He has been a career politician for the past 20 years. He has never been a senior public servant. He has never been in the private sector. He's never had to make a payroll. He's never negotiated a major transaction of any significance. And I know this at times sounds harsh, but I used to run energy technology companies before I got into politics, and I had a board that I would report to. And I say to folks that if you were on a board hiring for the largest enterprise in Canada, which is what the Government of Canada is, and Mr. Poilievre applied for the job of CEO, he wouldn't even get to the first round of interviews. He would get thrown out at the very beginning because he has none of the requisite experience. So in that respect, I think the ballot box question is clear and the answer is clear, and we need to make sure that Canadians understand the magnitude of what they are being asked to decide in terms of who will actually lead the country through this challenging time. It's not all about the Canada-US, although I think a lot of it is, but I know on the island here, and certainly maybe to a slightly lesser extent on the Lower Mainland, it's also about climate change, it's about environmental issues. I used to run, as I said, energy technology companies, which actually worked to reduce carbon emissions, to find technologies that would actually allow us to move forward in a way that was lower carbon. And I got into politics because of climate change. I had younger daughters, and I worried a lot about the future that they would be inheriting. This party actually is the Green Party, even though we are red, in the sense that we actually have developed the most comprehensive climate plan in Canadian history. As the Environment Minister, I would go out into the world, and folks would tell me it's the most comprehensive climate plan that exists pretty much anywhere in the world. It is not just aspirational, it's practical. And while Elizabeth May is a very well-meaning person, she is not a practical person. And the solutions that she actually puts forward, and you saw this in the platforms of the last couple of campaigns, when experts looked and opined on who actually had the most credible climate plan, it was always the Liberal Party, it wasn't the Green Party, because we actually tried to marry the practicalities of keeping the country together, the practicalities of actually ensuring that people still had jobs, with the imperative to reduce emissions in line with what climate scientists tell us we must. So I would say for folks who have drifted to the Green Party because they felt that the Green Party was actually more in tune with what they wanted from an environmental perspective, you don't need to make that choice. You can be on the government side of the House and be fighting for a better and more sustainable environment. And the very last thing I will say, and then I will shut up, is it's also really important to have local voices. We have been missing voices from the island since 2015. We have not had anybody to speak for folks on the island. And that leaves it for people like me and others from the Lower Mainland to articulate what the concerns are of folks who live here. And many of the concerns are the same, but some of them are different. And having a local voice is incredibly important. And I think that this is a time where we actually can have local voices coming to Ottawa, sitting in the government caucus, having those conversations with the rest of the MPs from Canada. And you folks are really, really fortunate to have such a strong candidate, somebody who actually can take
questions from these gentlemen. You can make it 2 and 2 or 3 and 1 or whatever you'd like to do, but let's get at it if you do have some questions. Great. All right, who's going to be first?
I guess you've been cut off.
No, not at all. He said it was his last question. He said it was, and Anne-Marie tells me we are on a tight sketch. So, who would like to ask a question? This gentleman here, and I'll leave it to you folks to do the thing. There's your mic.
Sure. Thank you. How do we get David on Check News and local television? Because I really think we've got a great candidate, but we haven't gotten to see him. So I'd really like to see him on some spots.
So good news. About 30 minutes ago, Check News was here and did a spot. So
is that going to be on tonight, David?
I'm not sure, but
okay, Corey said it
will. Likely it will be. Also, I'll be on CBC in the morning tomorrow, and we'll be having lots more media opportunities in the days ahead.
Okay.
And I was with him this morning when he did it, and he nailed the interview.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm a former resident of Nova Scotia and of Vancouver Island, and I'm a little nervous about the constant talk of environmentalism. Of course, we're all environmentalists, but I think we need a united country, and we can't just abandon oil and gas. That's ridiculous. And I think a lot of my friends and acquaintances are concerned about that. I mean, how realistic is all this? And I think it turns a lot of conservative voters off. And I would like to hear more on, emissions and cleaning emissions and, a productive and sensible use of the resources we have.
Go ahead.
So that could be a very long answer, but look, when we talk about the energy transition, it is a transition. It is not something that happens overnight. And on the one hand, you have the science of climate change, which tells us that we must dramatically reduce emissions, and we must do that over the period between now and 2050, or the world will be a very challenging one for people who are around in 2050. And if we do not actually dramatically reduce emissions in line with what science tells us, we will start to see feedback loops that make the ability to actually manage almost impossible. So the melting of the permafrost, for example, and the increased number of forest fires that we see, which emit carbon into the atmosphere. So we have to take action, but we also have to be thoughtful about how we do that, and we have to understand that some of this is actually going to take time. Oil and gas is not going away in the short term. If you go out here, most of the cars that are in the parking lot are actually gasoline vehicles, right? Most of us still use natural gas in our homes. But we do need to be taking action to reduce that. And that's why the government has introduced incentives for electric vehicles. We've introduced incentives to put heat pumps into homes in place of natural gas or oil furnaces, which are non-emitting. And in the case of heat pumps, you also get air conditioning, which as climate change gets worse, actually has more value. But it is a transition. I'm responsible for the oil and gas sector in this country, and what I say to the folks who are running oil and gas companies is you have to prepare for a time where we will peak and we will start to decline in terms of the amount of oil that gets utilized around the world, and gas. For oil, that will happen sooner than for gas. And in fact, in the developed world, we peaked 10 years ago. And China will peak in the next couple of years because of the deployment of electric vehicles. But the way to remain competitive in Canada for the oil and gas sector in a market that will inevitably must be a smaller market is to actually decarbonize the production emissions so that you actually are offering to the world lowest carbon content oil and gas, making yourself more competitive, ideally growing your share of an ever shrinking market. Eventually, we will get to a point where we will not be using oil or gasoline in our cars. We will not be using natural gas in our homes. That also doesn't mean the end of oil and gas. Like 30% of oil is actually used for non-combustion applications like lubricants, solvents, petrochemicals. That doesn't create climate change, as long as your production emissions are zero. So you have to have a strategy as to how you're going to move forward in a manner that actually tries to extract as much value as you can as a Canadian from Canadian resources. But we also need to get people to the point that they acknowledge, including in the oil and gas sector, that they have to change. This can't go on the way it is. Science tells us it cannot go on. And we need to be having better conversations with Alberta and Saskatchewan than perhaps we've been able to have to date. I grew up in Saskatchewan. I know it very well. I spent an enormous amount of time in Alberta. There are thoughtful voices there. You don't always hear them. I wouldn't say that's Daniel Smith, but there are some thoughtful voices there, and I think that over time we will find a consensus that is a reasonable consensus that balances practicality with climate science.
Sorry.
One more question? Anybody else?
Evan does here.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So speaking of Alberta, I worked 5 years in the innovation sector at Alberta Innovates.
Oh, yeah.
And notwithstanding the rhetoric that comes out of Alberta, Alberta Innovates, we put our due diligence, we modeled it after SBTC.
Yeah, it's bitumen beyond combustion comes out of Alberta Innovates. Yeah.
Alberta Innovates.
Yep.
So my question to you then is, knowing that, being from Victoria originally, that our technology center here is really where our local economy comes from. What is your role going forward with innovation and all various things that you talked about? And I'm putting this to David. Thank you.
Well, as somebody who has been innovating in my own sector for 20 years now, which was essentially, nobody even knew what it was when we started 20 years ago, and now it's included in every new major construction project in North America. So certainly I have taken the journey from one end to the other, and that is an enormous political undertaking, just for the record. Getting industry to adopt new technologies, to adopt new practices, getting them to shift in a meaningful way is incredibly complex. And so from that perspective, I see tremendous opportunity for idea incubation, for creating the conditions for new ideas to thrive, and then helping them scale into the market. That's the big challenge, getting companies and organizations to adopt this technology and do it in a way that allows it to scale and become commercially viable and economically viable in a way that eventually it becomes a standard. And that's a long journey. That never happens quickly. So as much incubation and as much support as is available is certainly, I'm in favor and would certainly speak very loudly to that effect, inside the government.
All right, I am told by the official timekeeper that you gentlemen have some things to do. I do have one question though. You look like you want to say something, do you?
I just wanted to say something to close, but that's fine.
Go ahead.
So look, you guys have been running a great campaign. I talk to the folks in the center almost every day about the different campaigns around British Columbia. You folks are running a textbook campaign, lots of folks out on the doors doing everything right. And I can't say that's true of all the campaigns in BC. But it's still a dogfight. And I think that folks should understand, like, the Green Party is deploying all of their resources in 3 ridings, and this is one of them. In the same way that the NDP is pulling people off their central campaign and sending them into Laurel Collins. At the end of the day, if you are really committed to trying to ensure that David is successful, you got to figure out how you can do even more over the next few days. It would be such a shame, and I think you would have a hard time looking yourself in the face if David lost by 50 votes and you knew that by going out and door knocking one more shift, maybe you could have found those. So, I mean, it's enormously impressive how many volunteers are here, and certainly that's great. But the next 2 weeks are just absolutely critical.
Could not agree more. Thank you, sir, very much. I have one question for you. When you were in the House, you were the honorable, right? Are you still honorable between elections?
You never lose the title honorable after you're in cabinet, but my wife thinks it's ridiculous. So.
Well, I was going to call you that, I guess so. Honorable Minister, would you like your coffee? Okay, so here we are, 2 weeks until election. We're already making plans for 8-party. We won't jinx it, but 8-party here, 2 weeks tonight. There's going to be music, there's going to be celebration, but not by Kool and the Gang, because that's old. So here's the thing, 2 weeks, you've got 2 weeks. As the minister, the honorable minister said, we've really got to get this going, and donations are so important. Those signs don't get made by elves, and we need to help finance those. So anything you can give on your way out besides your gift of time, which we appreciate so very much, is appreciated. Again, get the word out. And yes, and someone would like to say something here, so come on up. What is that?
Vote early.
Oh, yeah.
We have already.
Votes out there, and then sign up for your shifts on event.liberal.ca. We really need that momentum.
Thank you. My husband and I are driving. I have a mini convertible, so if you know of a 90-year-old who has a bucket list. But anyway, yes.
I just have a question. I think I would love to hear something about what's going on from a social media perspective. Do we have a presence?
Oh, we do. We do.
I haven't seen anything, and I would love to see it.
Okay, a wonderful, Paul would like to address that. He's our PR
We
guy.
actually have the most awesome social media presence of any of the candidates by far. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Threads, we're on
Blue Sky.
Blue Sky.